Hello, I hope everyone is having a fantastic week. Thought I would hop on and do this little tomato demonstration as promised. So we were reviewing Light Logic last week. So you have especially when you're using a single light source, it can be a little bit easier to tell the distinct highlights from the shadows, and creates more of a cast shadow, etc. So just for a quick review, we have your highlights, your specular highlights, the half tones, which is also in the light side of the object. For your shadow side, we have your core shadow. That's usually the darkest form on the object, or one of the darkest. This seems to be fairly dark as well, but there is the form shadow, which is the rest of the shadow on the shadow side. The bounce light, which you have quite a bit of bounce light on this tomato because it's reflecting off the table. And then you have your cast shadow, the shadow that the object casts. So we are gonna paint this pretty quickly. So I toned my canvas with my my neutral gray acrylic paint. This was actually N8 neutral gray. Usually I go a little bit darker, like N6, but I could not open the tube. Clearly I need to hit the gym a little more. But this works for now. So I am going to, let's see, actually, before I do anything, that's okay. I would recommend putting retarder in your paint. Mine is in the car, and since I already started this demo, I'm just going to keep going. But it does help your paints from drying out more quickly. Okay. So I also love working with the gloss glazing liquid, but you can just use water. So since I did the demo in class with the gloss glazing liquid, I'll just use water for this one. So you can sort of see the consistency of the paint. I'm going to start with a paint that's just a little bit darker than my background. And you can do this one of two ways. You can mix the paint as you go, or you can just kind of, or you can mix your piles ahead of time. I'm just going to mix as I go, but you can also mix some lighter piles and some darker piles. It's a lot easier too when you're working with just two values, black and white, and mixing everything from there. But let's see. So first I'm going to get the basic shape, and normally I would probably work horizontally since this object is wider than it is tall. But for demonstration purposes, it just works to have my photograph here and my palette here. So I'm looking at the object. The right side is a little bit higher and the left side is a tiny bit lower. The stem is a little off-centered. It's a little to the left. Let's see, it's fairly round. I'm looking at the widest points. I would say that they're probably about mid tomato. Let's see, and if you're getting this where the paint seems a little dry, you can just add a touch more of your medium or your water. If you are working with oil paint, this is probably an easier process because it'll stay wet longer, and so it's easier to blend. So I would recommend just using a little bit of your walnut oil if you're working with oil paint. Or I know some of you are also working with the water-based oils, and there is a medium that you can purchase with that. It's by Winsor Newton. I know they sell it at Amazon, and I'm sure they sell it at some supply stores as well. Let's see. Yeah, I don't have it, but I can show you in class what it looks like if anyone needs that. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lay out, I need to stop talking and get painting so my paint doesn't dry. Just approximately where that shadow line will be. So I say that the core shadow is somewhere around here. I like to lay in my big basic shadow shapes first. Let's see, I can also lay in the stem. And I'm using a fairly large brush. This is a size 10 bristle brush, Filbert's head. Using a large brush, helps me fill in the shapes much quicker. And then it also just helps me to not get so specific with the details and just really focus on those big shapes, which can be a great way to start. Okay, I got my little stems there, and then we have just a really small little cast shadow underneath this tomato. So first thing I'm gonna do is probably mix that that core shadow. Let's see, and you can always hold up your paint to your reference photo. You can even put your photo into a plastic baggie and then paint on top of it just to see if you have the correct value and the correct color. So with this, with black and white paintings, you really only have to worry about value, which is nice, instead of color. So that's why we're starting with this. Okay, so just sort of laying that in, and you can see where it dips up a little bit and comes back down because of those shapes, those rounded edges on the tomato. Okay, and I also have a darker value down here, so I'm gonna pop that in. Now I'm gonna mix a paint that's just slightly lighter. I'm just taking a little bit of my white and mixing it into that gray that I have. And I'm gonna come in and try and add that right below my core shadow before it fully dries so that it'll blend a little bit better. So first I'm just laying it in. Let's see. And then to blend, you can also wipe your brush off so that you don't have a lot of paint on it, and just sort of go back and forth over those lines, just lightly to blend. If you need to make the core shadow a little bit darker, you can pick up a little bit more of this darker paint. I have a little pile right here that it's not purely black. It's already got some white mixed in there. Okay, so you can see the difference between the darker and then it gets a little lighter where that reflective light is coming in, and then we have the darkest area right here. Generally on an item, I would say that the core shadow is the darkest. This looks pretty dark down here with the cast shadow, so it just kind of depends. But just that's where observation comes in. Depends on the lighting situation. To be honest, this image might have been generated by AI. I'm not entirely sure. Okay, now I'm gonna come back and mix a value that's just slightly lighter than this core shadow. And this is probably dry. So let's see. I'm gonna have to remix those two. Okay, picking up my dog before he barks and ruins the demo. Much to his dismay. Okay. So I'm just kind of lightly stroking my brush and you can move it in various directions. I wouldn't go all the same direction. And it can help to use a larger brush. It can also be beneficial to, if your paint's already dry in an area, to mix that same value and kind of go right over it, just so then I can come in with my lighter color and it'll still mix in really well since I just wet that paint right below it. And my highlights don't go all the way to the edges. So I'm gonna create that gray value and then bring in some white. So if it's not bright enough, you can just kind of keep adding more white. And I'm just picking up a little bit of that paint. That's why it's not overwhelming. If I picked up a big glob, it would be really hard to mix it and to blend. Man, this stuff dries so fast. Okay, I'm picking up a little bit more of this mid-value gray. So that can be a good way to quickly mix your paint, is if you already have those globs laid out, because you can just come back and pick it up. A lot of artists too, rather than just blending back and forth, they will just create paint values or colors that are similar and lay them in next to each other rather than blending them back and forth, so that it creates a softer edge. Okay. Come in with that mid value, mix it into my highlight. Okay, so kind of creating these little cast shadows that are casted from the leaves. I might bring a little bit of this white back up into those shadows too. If I lose some of that form, ooh, let's see. Okay. I could probably punch up some of my highlights just a little bit. If you're working with your gloss glazing liquid, you can even, once your painting is a little bit dry, well, not a little bit, once it is dry, which happens in like 10 minutes, you can just put the gloss glazing liquid down wherever you're gonna paint, and then it should also help blend and make easier transitions. Okay, so going to, let's darken this a little bit down underneath the tomato. So I added more water and less paint just so it will easily lay down because this is getting pretty dry. I don't know if you can see the paw, the paw coming into the frame. Okay. And then we have the cast shadow, which is usually the darkest, and it's the darkest right underneath your object. This is such a small cast shadow, but you can still see that it has fairly soft edges. So to create the soft edge, since I don't have, I could approach this one of two ways. I could either blend it into the background and create a wet background color and then soften those edges and blend it in. I could lay down my gloss glazing liquid and then paint over it and just gradually use less and less paint as I come toward the edges. Or I could mix a value that is similar to that background color. Let's see, get a little more paint here and place that around the edges. So maybe a little lighter because that's, and get lighter in value as I blend away from the center of that shadow, and then gradually add a little bit more that darker paint toward the center, and that will create a softer edge around the outside. My dog just really wants to be in this demo. Okay. Or if you have some of that background color too, you can always mix that in. That is also something that can work. I need to come along and sharpen these edges a bit too around the outside of the tomato. So I can either do that with the paint that I'm working with, or I could come along with my background color and paint into it to sharpen those edges. So I wet my my brush, so it has a little bit more water than I usually work with, and that's why it's creating a little bit more of a sharp edge. I'm gonna create this highlight over on the left side. So the outer contour of an object generally has a harder edge. I could still soften this a little bit just so it looks like it rounds. So it rounds out a little bit. Softer edges do create a little bit more of a rounded feel, even if it is the outer contour of the object. Okay, now I'm gonna come in and darken some of these areas within that stem. This stem's kind of funny. It almost looks like a little handle, a little briefcase handle. Okay, so I'm getting the side of the stem is pretty dark. It's almost black. So you can squint your eyes to really see where those dark values lay. Okay, this one's got a Dark shadow here. And a little bit of a cast shadow underneath. You can use a smaller brush if it helps to get into those details. I'm just using the side of my brush. Okay. I'm just really looking where on the leaf is light and where is it dark. And then I'm going to come in with my lighter value. Let's see. Actually, that's more of a mid value, if you will. And then put my light value in the middle so to create that reflection. A reflective highlight, I guess I should say. And I'm just even dabbing in some of the highlights here since they're pretty small. Okay. So that's fairly close. I could also get out some more of my background color, just blot that out. Let's see. Yeah, it's pretty dry. I should have lifted it when it was still wet. But there's your tomato demo. I could maybe make him a little bit taller. I think it's a little bit short. But I feel like overall it's somewhat close.